Welcome to Asshat Analysts, the debate game show where the points definitely matter and we take things way too seriously. My name is Josh Johnson, and I'm joined here with my roommates, Nathaniel Jackson.
Yo.
And Kyle Jennis.
Howdy.
Stay tuned to find out who truly is the king of pulling random facts and arguments right out of their ass.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Asshat Analysts. This is our BS episode of the week. We are joined by the wonderful and incredibly intelligent Dr. Donald Jackson.
Whoa.
Also known as Nathaniel's father.
My father.
So, for this week's BS episode, we are going to be discussing what decade you would have liked to have been in high school. And the host decided we decided to pick like 4 years within this decade, and we'll obviously give our spiel to our special guest, and then our special guest will then decide to probe our arguments and see which one of us is the bullshitter. Who would like to go first, boys?
All right. Well, I picked the 90s, and more specifically, starting freshman year in August of 94. So I think there was a lot of stuff that happened in the 90s. We saw the launch of the World Wide Web in 91, and it was just a time where music was thriving and culture was kind of booming. There were wars going on, but there were wars in all of our decades.
Yeah.
But it wasn't they weren't world wars, so it wasn't necessarily as prevalent. But it was a time where culture was really changing and shifting and getting ready for the turn of the millennium.
I picked the 60s. So I went with the 60s, specifically 65 through 69. And I picked the 60s because there was a lot that happened scientifically. In 69, we had the Apollo 11 and Apollo 12. Apollo 11 having us land on the moon, which was a huge turning point for all of human history. There was also a huge boom in civil rights and activism. You have Martin Luther King, who is in 65 talking about how we need to be opposed to the Vietnam War. Downside to the 60s, the Vietnam War. So there, like Josh said, there were wars in all of our decades, but we were doing a lot of things in the 60s that really paved the way for what we are today. And I think we went through a lot of that civil rights stuff again during COVID, and to imagine having seen that in the 60s the first time around and what the first steps were taken, and I just think that would have been really cool.
And lastly, I went with the 1980s, specifically August of 83 through May of 87. So my big thing was being a musician. Like, this was a prime decade for music overall. And the reason I picked specifically like this chunk of the 80s was a lot of it was a lot of bands that I love were releasing some of their best albums or just huge albums during this time. Some bands were even just getting started too. That would have been like, imagine seeing, let's say like Metallica during their early days when they were first starting. Motley Crue when they were still getting more and more popular, but finally hitting bigger levels. Van Halen with 1984, like huge hits. Like, imagine seeing Van Halen in a stadium like during that time, like in high school. Imagine being like, all right, mom and dad, I'm going to see Van Halen. Bye. Like, a lot of that for me, like as a musician, would have just been like so cool to see all of that. Not only was the music huge, you also around the middle of the 80s had a ton of big movies come out too. Like, this was just movies and music were banging in the 80s. Like, in the mid 80s, you have movies like Ghostbusters, Indiana Jones: The Temple of Doom, The Terminator, Nightmare on Elm Street. All of those were like 84, which are some of the definitely higher end of like their respective genres. And then obviously you get later on into the 86 and 87. One of the big ones for me was Aliens, which was much like Terminator, like an iconic movie where you have the character of Ellen Ripley come back again in arguably, I wouldn't say better, but like an equally significant movie to the first movie. So it's just these movies, like they're like at the top of their game. It's just everything's at its peak then. And imagine being like a teenager in high school when all this is coming out, like the amount of influences that you would just have all around you, like, you know, and being able to like see all these bands for the first time, these movies for the first time, everything like that, going to your buddies' houses, you know, and just jamming out to all this stuff. It's just parties galore.
Yeah, Kyle was born in the wrong decade.
Clearly.
So let me ask you, Josh, I'll start with you. We'll go around the table. And I'm going to ask all three of you the same question. So Josh just gets to go first this time, and then I'll switch it up next time.
I'm ready.
So I heard a lot of recollecting about those decades and those times with respect to highlighting certain cultural events, scientific events, things like that. As you think about going back, because everybody went backwards, think about going back, what is the modern conveniences you enjoy today that you would not have, and how would you cope with that?
Well, so we didn't have, in the 90s, we had the, like I mentioned, the World Wide Web was launched. So we wouldn't have the internet. We wouldn't be able to produce this podcast and send it out, or if we did, it would have to be live over the radio, or I guess recorded over the radio. But so I mean, there's that. My job wouldn't exist. I wouldn't be able to do what it is that I do for a living, which I'm not necessarily going to say my company name, but it does. It works over the internet. Knowledge sharing would be completely different. While we wouldn't have trouble with social media, there would also be far less advancements in communication had the internet not existed. So that, and then also cable television, which is just another step kind of along with those two coming together to create, you know, video streaming and things like that have allowed us to watch all of the movies that Kyle mentioned having come out and have them at our fingertips whenever we have time available to consume that media.
Nathaniel, 60s?
The big thing that I think pertains to me, you know, my job, I'm working in the music industry. Most of the gear I sell, with the exception of the recording gear, existed. Guitars existed, and you could go buy guitars in music shops. You know, all that stuff existed. My job and my career would be very different. You know, everything was a lot more analog back then, tape to tape. No Pro Tools, none of that. That didn't exist yet. There would be no cell phones, and we would be all on maps, you know. And honestly, personally, I would love that. I hate how addicted I am to technology, so I feel like it, in general, would have been easier to be alive in the moment in the 60s. So, yeah, I would absolutely love that. I would probably still be a musician, but it would be a very different type of musician. I'd probably actually be better at playing music as opposed to making music, which, you know, I actually would like to eventually get to that point now. But I think I would be a better, more well-rounded musician if I were alive in the 60s. Other than that, the lack of technology, I mean, I would miss movies for sure, the movies that we have today. As our audience knows, I'm a little obsessed with Dune.
A little? A little.
And I'm a big Star Wars nut and all that stuff. And Star Wars didn't exist yet. So, you know, I would for sure miss a lot of that. But, hey, 2001: A Space Odyssey was out. It came out in '68, so I could see that. The original Planet of the Apes was out too, so I would, there are still good movies out, just not quite what they are today.
Most of what I would miss would be ease of portable like music and anything. Like obviously we had like Walkmans and actually CDs released like the early mid 80s. I think that they were first designed in like 82, but which helped with ease of storage. But obviously we didn't have like MP3 players yet or anything like that. None of that had been figured out. There was a good amount of musical gear and obviously just musicians out there. Like everyone was shredding their butts off, trying to be some different iteration of Eddie Van Halen. So that would definitely, as someone who loves playing guitar but does not have the discipline to learn like that stuff, that would definitely motivate me more just because everyone's doing it. I'm like, all right, I guess I got to hop in. But not only that, I love playing trombone too. And one of my favorite bands is Chicago, who, while they moved away at this time from more like the horn section of stuff and started doing more like pop rock ballads, eventually you'd see Peter Cetera leave and go do his solo career in the 80s. They would still have horn stuff, and I joke with some of my friends about like I want to be Nashville's trombone hero instead of guitar hero, because I tell people all the time, if you need horn work, let me know. I play horn. They're like, seriously? I'm like, yeah, I do. And they're like, no way. So just imagine to take that back, not only to where it's still a guitar-rich market and like a band-rich market, but to still be able to do something different, which you guys know me, I like different. It would just be able to do something different in a different time and potentially have a different impact. So much like Nathaniel, I would more than likely still be in music, just probably a little more disciplined. And the biggest thing with music is it was a lot more word of mouth. So you had to like know a lot of friends and you had to have a lot of friends get out and be like, oh, hey, I heard this, whatever. So a lot of the shows you'd go to would be a lot more like underground stuff, which that's how a lot of bands start. Just they play for like a dozen people and it's just people at friends' houses or backyards or whatever. It's like, that's the big thing for me. But I could probably live without a cell phone realistically, just because again of how much was just going on. There's still a good amount of media. There's ways to see movies. You can still listen to music and everything. Enough of it would still be there for me to live comfortably in that period of time.
Good. Okay, Nathaniel, you'll be first this time. Same question for all three of you. What hairstyle would you choose, and what fashion choice would you be interested from that era wearing?
Going nature hippie Bob Dylan. I want, not Yellowstone. Oh, Yosemite. In the 60s, Yosemite, when it was being, turned into a place of rock climbing and not just a nature place, and it wasn't a national park yet, I don't believe. But there were concerts going on, and there were people that were living in Yosemite, and all they were doing was eating, catching, food and making food and climbing all day long. I would most likely have long blonde hair, and either if I were doing the Yosemite thing, I would probably be shirtless.
Would your beard be any longer?
I might go no beard. I'd probably be no beard.
I'd be scared to see no beard, Nathaniel.
The soul patch.
Oh no, that's definitely a.
No,
that is not a '60s facial hairstyle.
I might have mutton chops.
Interesting. I could see that.
I think you should do it today.
I'm good. But yeah, no. I'm gonna go no shirt, barefoot, like some brown pants. And then probably a bandana of some sort.
About you,
and
Kyle?
mutton chops.
I'd embrace the more metalhead stuff. I'd keep my hair growing. The leather,
metal?
the leather studs thing from like Judas Priest, even like the early Metallica stuff, the The white shoes, gotta have the white shoes. Basically, that's most of my wardrobe. Most of my wardrobe is just like black shirts anyway. So just, I would embrace it. I would go full on and be like, yes, like I'm all about this music. I'm here to support it. I'm here from the beginning. Let's go. Bring it on.
Okay. Josh?
Dickies, wallet chain, and a black T-shirt.
Hair?
Probably just shortcut, which I realize is not necessarily a style, but
Like what you have, like, is your current hairstyle like what some of the guys had? Like, I don't know.
Nah.
No,
90s
I mean,
was
not necessarily.
super gel greased back
Oh,
hair.
yeah.
It was spiky jelly hair.
Yeah.
yeah, but
Probably
shortcut.
and dyed. A lot of people dyed their hair
Squirting
too.
big piles of gel in your hand, and
Liberty spikes
spiking it.
were those? Yeah, Liberty spikes were those. I think those were 90s. It was either 90s or early 2000s, but I think that was 90s. Yeah, so
Frosted
the
tips.
Liberty spikes with the bleach,
frosted
bleach
tips.
Liberty
is a good-
spikes.
Frosted tips is a good 90s.
Yeah, I'm thinking Protozoa from Xenon, if anybody knows that.
Shockingly, no.
Okay, that's okay.
I feel left out now.
Really, you're not missing out.
All right, fair enough.
It's Disney Channel original movie, and he played a rock star, but that's whatever.
It sounds like earlier Camp Rock to me. Not really, actually. Never mind.
No,
Take
it
that
took
back.
place in space.
I redact my previous statement.
But yeah,
Cut that out.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, Kyle, you're first this time.
Bring it on.
What would be your favorite date activity during that era?
Are we talking? Assuming I'm not
Like-
in school.
Well, you're in high school, right? This is the era you're
Right.
going to high school, but you're going on a date to do an activity, not intimacy, an activity.
Both of you just sit. No, I'm kidding. Ooh. Honestly, with the amount of music I'd have, it'd probably be like either driving to like a local record shop, going around, checking out what's new, just collecting records, going to a buddy's house, putting some on. If their parents permit, maybe having a beverage or two. But yeah, and if there's some like local show or whatever, just head out there. Either someone drives us there, or ride our bikes out there to our buddy's house if they're playing a show, or just wherever.
Josh?
Break into a construction site and skateboard in the empty pool.
Yep, that's perfect.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh my god.
Nathaniel?
Probably trespass onto some government property and smoke a joint.
Nice.
So, last question that I have for each of you. Why is your choice better than the other two? I don't care who goes first.
I think because it being the latest one, I think it benefits from all of the great things that did happen prior, but then has a little bit more, because there's the new innovations that happened in that time, but is still benefiting from the innovations and things that happened from before.
Okay.
I think there was more going on in the world in the 60s that impacted the way the world kind of turned out and is today than in other decades. I think the space race in the 60s, is the reason we have SpaceX and NASA and all of that, and all of the human rights and everything that happened was life-changing, and seeing that and having the opportunity to be a part of that would have been something very special.
For me, actually, kind of like we talked about with Ikigai, the sense of like community, and like I said, with the word of mouth, is like, it's all about the tight. It's like, hey, this is a select thing. It's like being a part of something unique in a way. And to me, there's a lot of uniqueness that stands out. Like I said, I picked a lot of it for the music. So a lot of it would be like going to, this band's first show, and all of a sudden they blow up, and you're like, oh my God, I remember seeing them at their first show. And a lot of it was just experiencing. So like Nate said, there were a lot of impactful things. A lot of what I picked was impactful, like media things, like movies, music, TV, whatever else. Just seeing those things that, like, even I remember watching for the first time, actually seeing them when they were actually new, would have just been incredible. Just to be like, I was a part of some cool, unique experience.
You have any more questions for us?
No, I don't think so.
You think you have your answer?
I think I do, but I could be way wrong. This will be fun.
All right. Well, Kyle's going to hand out our little sticky notes that we write our answers on. We're going to go ahead and wrap up today's episode, and we'll be back on Friday where we will read everyone's votes. Again, just to reiterate, the guest's vote is the only one that matters. Josh, Kyle, and I will be voting, but that's just for fun for us so that we can feel like we are a part of it. But yeah, we will be back on Friday with our Simpleton episode.
Bye-bye.
Well, that's it for today's episode. Be sure to join us on the next episode where we will continue to debate as good friends do. Follow us on Instagram and YouTube and stay up to date on all things Asshat, and to participate in polls and activities throughout the week based on the themes of the upcoming episodes.
We also started a Patreon for those of you who are interested in showing your support in a more direct way. On our Patreon, we have a ton of bonus content, including tier lists, loser dinners, and bonus podcast episodes.
We want to continue making content that makes you think, smile, and especially laugh. And the best way that you guys can help us do that, leave a like or a comment, download and share all these episodes with your friends and family members who you think would enjoy our tomfoolery, our shenanigans, and all those other crazy words that encapsulate our content.